Welcome to Soul of Travel podcast. Today, I'm very excited to be speaking with Shivya Nath, and she is a travel writer, photographer, digital nomad, environmentalist, and someone who I was drawn to because of the way that you tell stories and the way that you authentically express your values, and how I see that being shown in the way you are creating all of the things that you have brought into travel and writing and activism and all the different parts of yourselves. Like I can really feel like I have a strong sense of who you are. And so I was so drawn to that and started following you. And we've been talking, I think, for about a year or more to try to have you join me on the podcast. So Shivya, I'm so excited that you're here and I can't wait for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Christine. It's so great to finally be here. I think I've also followed you for a long time, and there's such an alignment in our values and the things we do. And I've heard some great episodes on your podcast as well. So it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, as we begin our conversation, I would love for you to just take a moment and introduce yourself and kind of let our listeners know who you are in the space of travel right now. And then we'll kind of go backwards and look a little bit at your journey to get here.
So I guess I have multiple identities in the space of travel right now, which I'm also trying to navigate. But I'm the founder of Climate Conscious Travel, which is an impact consultancy that I launched last year. And my goal with Climate Conscious Travel is really to work with businesses and destinations to integrate community-centric climate action in their tourism offering. So that's everything from figuring out how they can reduce their carbon footprint while doing carbon removal in a way that is beneficial locally to the areas that they're having their trips in or having their accommodations in. It also means climate awareness. Travel is such a powerful feature, but we're still not talking about climate change when we're, out in some of the wildest parts of our planet. And it's such a missed opportunity that we really need to build that in to educate travelers about what's happening with climate change. And when you experience it yourself in person, it's so much stronger and it drives you to action. So that's something we're doing as well. But before I launched Climate Conscious Travel, I was and still am. I've been a travel writer for a decade now, I think. I kind of lose track of time with the 2 years of the pandemic. But I've been writing stories at the intersection of slow travel and mindful travel, and really trying to center, environmental aspects as well as local community. So I've written for everyone from BBC Travel to Lonely Planet, National Geographic, and so on. But I'm also a travel blogger and Instagrammer. So there are different parts of the same puzzle. But my goal is really to kind of inspire people to travel in a way that makes a bigger difference to their own selves, but also to the places and the people they visit. So that kind of drives everything that I'm doing right now.
Yeah,
I think
thank you.
that's my introduction.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And, talking about inspiring people to travel in a more meaningful and impactful way, obviously that's very much where we overlap. And I love, for me, reading your work, it always helps me set the bar higher. So I always think, what else could I do? And I'm continually inspired by how you are able to create even more impact when you travel. And I think that's so important because there's so many ways and there's so many different ways of thinking about it. And I think as travelers, we have to find the thing that we're really passionate about and then turn that into the way that we create an impact. And I think that's one way that people can really lean into those choices. And like I said, I see that in the way that you write and the way that you have told the story of moving through the world through, social media and your blog and your articles. And so I would love to just understand a little bit more how you moved into this profession. So can you share a little bit about when you knew that you had this passion for travel and when you decided to really turn this into your way of being and living?
So I guess I have to take you back to my first corporate job, which was back in 2009, I think, when I graduated from university. And that was the time of a financial recession. So the companies that I wanted to work with, like it was mostly the FMCG companies, since I did a second major in marketing, and that's where my interest lay. So I was looking to work with like the PNGs or the Unilevers of the world, but it so happened that they weren't hiring at the time. And the best job I could land was with the Singapore Tourism Board, because that's where I was living at the time. And I just happened to, be in their digital marketing team. And at that time, it was like a really tiny team because, nobody really believed that social media could be the next big thing or digital marketing could like grow the way it has grown. And so we were like a really like a small tight-knit team, and we were doing some amazing work together. But we also had to really fight our battles to prove to people that social media works. And I think it was during that time that I started following travel writers. And it's of course really fascinating from the outside when you imagine someone, who's traveling and kind of being paid to travel the world. And I thought, wow, this is not the job I want. That's the job I want. So, so I decided to so I managed to convince my bosses to give me a couple of months of unpaid leave from work. And during that time, I spent the first month volunteer traveling in a place in the Trans Himalayas in India. And even though I grew up in India, I'd never really traveled in India and definitely not traveled solo. So this was a big leap of faith to kind of, take time off from my work in Singapore and come back to India and travel to this really remote place. And I spent that month volunteer traveling. So I was working with an organization which is essentially a social enterprise. So they use tourism as a means to bring about sustainable development in the region. So a lot of that money is invested back into, creating solar baths, solar energy in remote villages, which are either off the grid or don't have enough electricity. And so just being there and kind of learning about their work really inspired me. And it felt like this is something I could do because I really enjoyed the traveling aspect of it. But then it also seemed like you could use travel as a way to create an impact in the world. And I still needed to figure out how that would look like for me. But I think that was the starting point of my journey because on this trip, it was the first time I slept under billions of stars. I hiked and hitchhiked solo, which was quite unheard of, at least at that time in India. Very few people were doing this, especially as single women. And at the same time, I was meeting people who were doing some inspiring work and being able to support them through this organization. So it was all sort of, it became a whole picture to me that I could follow and emulate. And that's where this journey really started.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's so amazing to think about how the ways that things reveal themselves to you, that before you started that trip, none of this would have been how you pictured spending your life. And all of a sudden you have an experience like this and you see all these pieces come together and pieces that maybe don't make sense from the outside, but you just know that it's again, like aligned with who you are, or it kind of awakens a part of yourself that you didn't know yet. I feel like so many of the women I speak to, that's a part of how travel became a part of their life, is it really told them about who they are and what they wanted to be and the impact that they wanted to create by traveling. So I think that's really, really a great experience. In terms of, you mentioned you hadn't really traveled much in India before and hadn't traveled solo before. What was that like for you to kind of, I know a lot of people I've talked to, when they think about traveling solo for the first time, especially as a woman, there's a lot of things you have to overcome or a lot of ways you have to push yourself. But what was the value of that experience for you then? And certainly a lot of value for you now.
So I think that's a great question. I think what happened with me was while I was in Singapore and planning this trip, it all sounded really romantic in my head. But I kind of made the mistake of spending like my first few days in India visiting my family. And I didn't quite realize what a big deal this was for them. So I think it was probably the most challenging week or 10 days I've spent with my folks because they were really terrified at the idea of me going to this place all by myself. And I think I spent a lot of that time just fighting their fears that I kind of forgot that I probably have fears of my own that haven't surfaced yet. And maybe in a way that helped because I really wanted to convince them that, I've got this. And in the process, I kind of ended up convincing myself. So I think in a strange way, like their fears, even though some of them were projected on me, like I think it kind of helped me overcome my own fears and kind of really push myself and make sure that I'm ready to do this, even if it was just to prove to them that I could do this. Um, so I guess the first couple of days were a little bit more worrisome, but I always feel like in India, like the more remote you go, the safer it feels. And so in this place, which is called City Valley, it's really quite far away from the rest of the country. So you have to spend almost 2 days on the road to get there. And it's absolutely spectacular and stuff, but also people live really isolated life. And so when people come from outside, you really have deep exchanges with complete strangers. And I think that puts me in such a comfort zone that I felt like, this is what I'm meant to do. So it was a great place for a first solo trip. And I guess what I experienced at home kind of pushed me to conquer my own fears, or at least fight them or put them away.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that turns out to be the most powerful thing about travel is how you learn the strength that you have within yourself, especially in those situations. And like you said, if you're battling your fears or projected fears, either way, it's something that you're navigating. And as you work your way through those, you become so much stronger on the other side, and you then can take on bigger and bigger challenges as travelers, as professionals. I think it's just such a valuable experience for people. And I think that it's such a strong foundation for what you have been doing. I know that you ended up publishing a book called The Shooting Star, which is also the name of your blog. Can you share a little bit about how you got into that and decided to write the book, and where that journey came together?
Yeah. So I think the book kind of it almost happened to me. It wasn't something that I had consciously planned to do because I think I very much enjoy the instant gratification of blogging and social media, or even writing for other publications. But the book itself was a very different and a much longer journey because you're spending so much of time and I guess putting so much of yourself into it, and you don't know, if it's going to ever come to fruition, if anyone's going to publish it, if anyone's going to read it. And so even though like this had been, it was at the back of my head and people had, suggested it pretty often, I never really thought that I would actually write a book. But I think it happened to me when I went for an ayahuasca ceremony in Ecuador. And so I know there are very different perceptions that people have about it, but I kind of did it with a shaman who's been living in the Amazon rainforest all his life, and through a student who's been studying with him for the past 20 years. So I guess in that sense, it was more authentic than some of it that is offered in other parts of the world. But it was during that, it was a very, very intense experience, and I ended up, revisiting parts of my childhood and teenage that I had no conscious recollection of. But one of the things that kind of came to me during that time was a book with this really colorful cover, and I think at that point it hit me that yeah, I am going to write a book someday, and this is what it might look like. And many years later, that kind of really did happen. So the book was really about my journey in my 20s. So really about growing up in a small town in India with a pretty conservative family, and then kind of adopting this nomadic lifestyle where I was traveling solo and living in remote parts of the world with communities and really learning about their life. And it was also a journey from a regular 9 to 5 corporate job to living this life. So I guess it is a culmination of both my travels and my personal journey. Um, and yeah, that's how the book came about.
Yeah. My like inner child loves all of that, because, and I think that's also something I didn't realize was so resonant for the work that you do is growing up. I, every time I would learn about a different like indigenous population in some region, or just a culture that was so different than mine, I always just imagined myself going there and living with them and learning everything, and just like trying to understand how all these different places looked in different parts of the world. Like when I was young, I just really wanted pretty much the experiences that you're sharing about, right? Like I really wanted to spend time, and I wanted to kind of have the opportunity to belong to these different cultures, and be able to spend more time there so that I could have a deeper understanding of their way of life and their beliefs and rituals, and just community in general. And I I didn't realize until later in life that that wasn't very common. It's just how I was so curious about experiencing the world. And so every time I see someone doing that, it just really speaks to that part of me that always fantasized about that experience. And so I really love that. But what has traveling that way allowed for in your life in terms of slow travel, connection with community, and really beginning to understand places? And then I would say that probably also lends itself to a more ethical storytelling because of the depth of knowledge you have about a place. But what has that journey been like for you?
So I think that journey, as I think we personally experienced as well, has been transformative on in every sense of the word. So right from challenging, my worldviews on pretty much everything that I learned growing up or was taught in school or picked up in college. I think it changed my worldviews. It changed everything I think I know about life. But at the same time, keeping the space to further evolve, my beliefs and my philosophies and so forth. So I think it's really allowed me to not just to figure out who I am as a person and what my values are, but also to kind of allow things that I haven't known before to kind of influence what I am going to be going forward. And I think that's so powerful because we live in such polarizing times. We live in the time of a climate emergency and a lot of other things. And just being out there and learning from the world can be so transformative in personal ways and in professional ways. And I think it's really influenced every part of my journey. And of course, ethical storytelling or responsible storytelling is one of them because I feel like as travelers we can either just show up in a place and just see what happens, or we can be a bit more aware about where we are going, why we're spending time there, how much time are we spending there, where we're going to stay, who we're going to interact with. And that doesn't mean planning everything to the T, but really just being aware of the little choices that we make, because those can lend themselves to then like experiences that we can never imagine having. And those experiences in turn transform us both personally and professionally. And at the same time, they have an impact on the places that we go to and the people we meet and the communities that live there. And so storytelling is one way to kind of, I guess, not educate, but kind of probe people a little bit to think a little bit more about their choices, because it can have an impact on them, and it can definitely have an impact on the places that they're going to. So
Mhm.
that's where it all stems from.
Yeah. And I do think we really connect as humans, we connect to stories. So, like you said, it is maybe not always meant as a tool for education, but as people read and connect, it will be influencing their worldviews and their way of understanding the world. And so I think there's such a responsibility in how we share those stories and the stories we choose to tell, and thinking about what that looks like after we put it out into the world. I think as creators and travel writers, we're so often thinking about, doing having the experience, writing about it, how we want to tell the story, and then like getting it published. And then that feels like the big win. But then we have to think about like what are the things that happen after that. And I think that just becomes this more holistic way of looking at writing and at creation and at storytelling. And a lot of people that won't have the privilege to travel the way that we have, this is going to be the thing that, like you said, shapes their world views and their cultural understanding, because they won't have that experience firsthand. So I do think it's so important, and we just connect to that in a different way than like a news report. I'm going to really relate to this intimate account of a conversation with some woman in a village somewhere. Like, I'm going to really become into that experience, even if I wasn't there, in a way that I won't if I hear the same statistics or facts or ideas like on the headline of a paper. And so I think this is one thing that I really appreciate about the way that you have written and have told the stories of destinations and of people. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about, I know, well, I also don't know time anymore. I was going to say, I think it was last year, but I don't know, when you went to Chile and you were writing there, when you went for the Work for Humankind project. I would love to hear more about that. That was, I think, maybe one of the things that threw you in front of my radar. But I was really interested in this project and the pieces that you've written afterwards. So I'd love for you to share about that.
Yeah, I would love to talk about it because it's really been a life-changing experience for me in more ways than I can describe. But this is a project that was started by Lenovo, and their goal was kind of to connect this remote, island community. So the island is called Robinson Crusoe, and it's located about 600 kilometers off the coast of Chile. So it's really far out in the Pacific, and it's actually one of the hardest places to get to. I know there are travelers, like intrepid travelers, who try to get there for several weeks and just haven't managed to, because you need absolutely perfect weather conditions, and then everything logistically to work out. And so just to be invited to this opportunity. So we went through like several rounds of training, and there was a psychometric analysis to figure out if, as a traveler, you can handle living somewhere so remote for a month. But there were about 5 of us who were brought together to this island from different parts of the world. And the goal was really twofold. So one was to prove that, with technology, we can work from anywhere in the world today, including an island as remote as Robinson Crusoe. So we could continue our jobs or whatever we did for a living on this island. And at the same time, it was to spend some time and skills volunteering on the island. So working with the island community on different aspects of their lives and what they felt was important for them. So two of the projects that I initiated while I was there was one is a community farming project, because back in the day, like about the 1980s or so, most of the food that was consumed on the island was grown there. But since television came into their life, and they have lobster fishing, which is really popular. So since that income came into their lives, a lot of people kind of stopped farming. And many community members kind of lament the loss of just farming tradition. And so we started working with the local school to reinitiate community farming on the island. So we had a partner plan that we were able to get from the municipality and really get the children and some of the adults involved in the project. And that's something that's continuing on the island now. And then the second thing was that the island, because it's this remote Pacific island, all the electricity comes from diesel. So they consume about 1,300 liters of diesel a day, which is a lot of diesel. And just the footprint of that for such a small community is really high. So at the moment we're sourcing, I kind of helped put together a proposal, and we managed to raise half the funds we need to do a pilot project to get solar energy to the island. And we're still trying to raise the other half. But hopefully by the end of this year, we should be able to do a pilot project there. And so the project was incredibly powerful because on a personal level, it was an opportunity for me to live with this remote community that is very much in tune with nature. And the island actually has more biodiversity than Galapagos in Ecuador. And there are more species that evolved in isolation on the island. So they have this beautiful little hummingbirds, which are red in color, and they're only found on this island, and there's less than 500 of them left in the entire world because they're only found there. And so we talk about species extinction and things like that. But to really see it up close is pretty transformational. And so both personally and professionally, I felt like, you know, this is it. Like, I mean, this is what travel is meant to be, where you have these incredible experiences and allow it to transform you on a personal and professional level. And it was after that that I decided to start climate conscious travel and play a role, work more with the industry to kind of transform the way we work. And yeah, that's the gist of the project.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I also just wanted to mention that one of your pieces of writing was nominated by the wonderful community for a Bessie Award for the most impactful piece of writing. And your article that you wrote a bit about this experience traveling in Chile. And again, that was one of the things that was really resonant for me when I read it. So I just wanted to acknowledge that for your work as well. I love the wonderful community and the way they also are trying to bring light to some of the impactful work that women are doing in tourism around the world. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
also congratulations to you for last year's nominations and awards and being at the event. That was in Poland, right? If I'm not wrong.
no, I didn't go to the Poland one. I went to the one in the US, but there was one in
Okay,
Poland as well. Yes.
right.
Yeah, in Gdansk, Poland. Yeah, I think that it's so great to be able to celebrate one another's work. And I think that that's not often something that we spend time doing. Again, it's like we get to the point where we release things into the world and it's very exciting to win the awards, but sometimes we're already like on to the next thing and we don't take a moment to like receive that recognition. And I think this is something that's valuable in general when you're thinking in your business and when you are creative, like you just have to take a moment to be present instead of always being in moments of creation that are keeping you ahead and forward. So I think that's something our listeners might also relate to is just the ability to pause and like absorb something that has happened. I'm very bad at that. So I'm really trying to be more conscious.
I feel like as women, especially, we end up kind of underplaying that as peoples, and that's really not a great way to function professionally and personally.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm really bad at it as well. But I always try to take that moment to think, okay, this is worth something. But yeah, it doesn't always happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you were also talking a little bit about well, for instance, for that trip, the planning and preparation, but I did want to talk to you because you have spent so much time living as a digital nomad and traveling, although I do believe right now you just kind of dropped an anchor. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but what does it take to kind of prepare for that and plan for that and going from destination to destination to um I guess I'm getting ready to travel with my daughters for 3 years, my three daughters for 1 year. And we are really wanting to be able to take some of the values of Soul of Travel and Lotus Sojourns and put that into practice. So we are constantly looking for destinations where we can connect with women's social impact projects, where we can stay at more sustainable properties. We're thinking about how we can limit our carbon emissions as we travel, all of those things. How do you bring those values that you have into your preparation, and how could you maybe share with other travelers who have ways that they want to bring their values into their travel experience? How do we navigate that?
That's a great question. And I'm kind of out of touch because I did kind of drop an anchor this year. I think during the pandemic, it was more out of circumstance to be based in one place. But post the pandemic, I just felt like I couldn't justify, I think I've flown more than my fair share, and I just can't justify doing that anymore. And that is one of the triggers to kind of find contentment in a slower life and live in one place and focus on other aspects of tourism. But pre-pandemic, I missed out on my bags for almost 7 years, and I kind of look back at that time and wonder, wow, how did I do that? But I think what really helped was having this research process before I decided where I was going next and what I was going to do there. So my goal was never to, go to a destination and, tick off a whole bunch of places to see, but really to find, maybe a community that I can live with, or a place that's very close to nature where I could spend, a couple of months, because I was always working on the go and at the same time trying to experience a place. And so my research process always involved looking for uh, kind of what you mentioned, women-run enterprises or social enterprises, somewhere where I could, also contribute back in some way, whether that was through storytelling or, having an exchange of skills or something of that sort, if my skills were relevant to the work that they were doing. Um, and then I also try to connect with local people as much as possible. So in that sense, social media has been a great tool. Looking at Twitter and Instagram and kind of finding people based on common interests. So people who are maybe also writers or storytellers, or since I practice a vegan lifestyle, people who are also vegan. So looking at people like that kind of allowed me to break the ice right away, because when you have a common interest or a passion that connects you, then it's easier to kind of get past the initial social awkwardness or whatever, and really also be on the same bandwidth. So when I met such people, they would always, recommend or connect me to someone else who could be, someone that I could connect with, or who maybe run an enterprise, whether in tourism or something else. And so it always leads to, different connections. So I've always tried to look for these interface connections, and people in tourism who are doing meaningful work. And I think that's where I've always found most of my inspiration and also most of my stories.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that you live a vegan lifestyle, and that's something I think is also something that maybe holds people back from traveling, because they're unsure of how they can, find what they need when they're traveling, especially in certain countries that maybe aren't known for having cuisine that's vegan. What was that like for you traveling, and how were you able to kind of prepare for that, or, create opportunities? I think that it's just something maybe that either some people haven't thought about at all, or some people have chosen not to travel because of that. And so I was just really curious about that part of your journey.
So I think it was around 2015 that I decided to turn vegan, because I suddenly had this, suddenly in different ways, the universe kind of sent across, this message that I think was hiding from me all this time. But just learning about what happens in the animal farming industry, and not just the industry, but also when we say free range. I know that there are certain communities that have no choice but to depend on animal farming, but for the rest of us who are a lot more privileged, I feel like many of us can make choices which are more compassionate. And so in 2015, when I decided to turn vegan, I felt like maybe I'll have to choose between being vegan and remaining a digital nomad at some point. Because if I don't have access to a kitchen, it means I'm always relying on other people to feed me. And even when I do have access to a kitchen, if I'm in a place that's pretty far away from a fancy supermarket or something like that, it's going to be really hard to get adequate nutrition and feel satisfied with what I'm eating. But I think my journey has been it's been really revelatory, in the sense that I've learned so much more about ancient cultures around the world by virtue of being vegan. So, for example, when I was in Ethiopia, I was surprised to learn that for about 200 days of the year, people practice a vegan lifestyle, and that's linked to Orthodox Christianity. And so the cuisine, happens to be very vegan friendly. It's one of my favorite cuisines in the world. In Japan, I learned that before the Edo period, um, during the Edo period, or was it before? I can't remember. I'm a bit lost. But in Japan, I learned that there was a time when people mostly lived a vegan lifestyle, and it was only much later that Meiji, the emperor, it was during the Edo period. So Meiji, the emperor, he kind of felt like there were people around the world who were like pagan buffs, and it was because they ate meat. And so he was the first ruler to eat horse meat, and that's how meat consumption began in Japan. And I found that out because I was there on assignment, and the dinner that we were served on my second day there, I was a bit dissatisfied with it, and I was like, after a long day out, I need to eat something, more satisfying and more nutritious. And so there's an app called Happy Cow, which is it's kind of like the TripAdvisor but for vegan and vegetarian food. And luckily on the app, it showed that 2 kilometers away there was a traditional Japanese izakaya, like a small bar with some food that had vegan options. And so I decided to make the journey in this cold, rainy weather. And when I got there, I realized that the owner was this elderly Japanese woman, and she had translated everything that she could do vegan in like she had these cards, and she had written everything that she could make vegan. And so I had a great meal, and then I asked her, why do you do this? Like, why do you offer vegan options? And then she told me about like the history of Japan and the food culture and how she kind of wants to keep that alive for people who still want to practice it. And that's something that I would have never known about Japanese cuisine, because when we think of Japanese food, we just think of like fish and meat and something that even vegetarians won't survive. And so in different ways, I've learned so much about ancient cultures and traditional practices around the world. And the Habitat app has been really helpful, and they don't pay me to say this at all, but it's really been a lifesaver in many parts of the world.
Yeah, I love that it just created another avenue for connection and cultural understanding and learning about destinations. Yeah, it's like what asking questions is how we learn. But I think sometimes when it's something really personal to ourselves, we maybe don't realize we're opening another door for discovery through that process. So I think that's great. And also, as soon as you mentioned the Happy Cow ad, which also I'm not paid to talk about, but I have heard so many people share it, and it is a really great resource. So for people listening, I would definitely look into that if that is something that you need to support you in your travels, because I've been sitting with people actually, and they pull that app up and they're like, oh, here's a place that we can go. So I think that's a really valuable resource to help kind of break down that barrier that some people may have. Um, let's see. One of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about as well is really like finding your voice and how you create content that is value-driven content and not necessarily just following trends. So when you're working in content creation, obviously there are things that you have to, I guess you don't ever have to do anything, but there's things that you might find yourself drawn to writing about because it is a trend or it is something that editors want, etc. But then if we really want to be creating a positive impact with our writing and our content, how do you balance that line? And how did you really find your voice and ability to be able to do that?
I think that's a great question, and I don't know if I have an answer for it. But I've spent the last month or so working on the travel storytelling course that I'm building, and one of the things I wanted to talk about is finding your voice. But I think it's something so intangible that it's really hard to put it in words. And so I have been thinking about my own voice and how it developed. And I feel like it's something, it's definitely value driven, but it's also something that is very personal to you. And the only way to grow it and to feel it is to kind of use it every day, and then refer back to see how it's been evolving. At least that's been my thought process. But I think with respect to following trends, it can be pretty challenging because, I mean, just with something like Instagram and how quickly it changed from being like this visual medium, being the photography medium to really being all about reels and videos. And I think I resisted it for the longest time because I really didn't want to do video content. But then I felt like, I've spent so much time and effort building this audience and this community. And so either I play, somewhat by the rules of the platform, or I just, get out of there, because otherwise I'm just like half there, half in and half out, which doesn't help anyone. And so I thought I'm going to give videos a try, but there's no way that I'm going to sacrifice what I want to talk about. And so it was a whole process to think about, how some of the stories that I would like to tell, how can I do that in video form? And so a lot of the travel content that I saw on Instagram was just about, these free videos from different destinations. with no context and no story to it. And of course, it's a visual treat, but that's about it. You don't really think about how travel impacts you or how it impacts these places or how these places have changed over the years. And so I wanted to challenge that. And so I started using this combination of video and text and kind of trying to tell really bite-sized stories, but doing it through the Instagram format of Reel. And then using the captions to talk about those stories further in a more narrative form. And I think that process made me realize two things. The first was that, if we are storytellers, we shouldn't let the medium stop us. So, maybe 10 years from now, there's going to be an entirely different platform that we can imagine right now. But as long as we have the stories within us and we have the right to tell them, I think we will find ways to adapt our voice to those platforms. And then the second is, there's such a wide range of readers out there, readers and followers and audiences out there, that every new medium is an avenue to reach a different and a larger group of people. And I think if we can create greater outreach for our stories, that's inspiration enough to experiment with those. So I try to stay positive about how things are going to evolve over time, and really just tap into ourselves as storytellers and see how we can adapt our voices.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable. For me personally, I have had so much resistance to that transition. Like it was hard enough for me to get myself on Instagram in the first place. And then because I think I love the full depth of a story, I had a hard time just thinking about, people reading 2 lines of something or listening to 30 seconds of something. Like I just, for me, it's very hard. Like what can I share of value in that capacity? Like that has been a hard thing. And then when I finally got on Instagram, I was like, great, I'll do the picture, but I'm going to have my caption's going to be long. I'm just going to be one of those people, and that's okay because that feels aligned to me. But then I have found over the last year or so that I have fallen more off of it because I haven't found my voice in video content. And like, if I do it, then what ends up happening is me like just saying the thing I would have written, which is kind of is not what it was created for. It's trying to figure out how to use it. And like you said, if you're going to be there, you do need to figure out how to use it or else your voice is lost. And if you're trying to create impact with your storytelling, you need to find a way to put your voice in front of the people that need to hear from you and learn from you. So I think it's such a just like this endless spiral trying to figure it out and how to be authentic and how to do it in a way that actually gets you heard. And there's, like you said, there's just so many, it's constantly changing in a way that I think we also haven't navigated as storytellers before, because for so long, we had print media and like things changed slightly, but it wasn't such a dramatic change. And then social media happened, and early in social media, like what you were talking about in Singapore, like you could see, oh, this is a way to reach so many people, but it was still a little bit simpler, I guess. And now it just seems like it evolves every day and you have to figure out the new thing. So not only are you trying to figure out your voice and your authentic way of storytelling and how you want to connect and the impact you want to create, but you have to figure out the tool to do it upon. And I just think it will be really interesting to see how this evolves as a medium and for storytellers and the ways that we can use this going into the future.
Yeah, I think it's just because maybe we were so embedded into, like the blogging and the like the early social media that this change feels really hard. But I'm sure someone who's worked in print all their lives or like for 10 or 20 years also felt that transition to be really hard towards social media. And for a lot of people, it just wasn't possible to make that transition. But yeah, I know what you're saying, and every time there's a new, social media platform, I'm like, oh, I hope it doesn't take off because I really don't see myself going somewhere else now. So yeah, the feeling is mutual.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all that you have shared. I wanted to just give you the space if there is anything else that you wanted to bring in the conversation to make sure we didn't miss any of the projects that you're working on or anything that you wanted to share with the solo travel community.
I think we've pretty much covered everything, but I did want to wish you the very best for your upcoming trip. I think it's going to be really exciting, and I'm waiting to hear about the destinations you choose and the kind of experiences you choose to have there. And maybe there's also a book in there. I hope there is, because it would be really amazing to read that and also get your stories out in a more I wouldn't say traditional way, but in a more long form and a way that feels more satisfying. So I really look forward to that.
Thank you. Yeah, I have been speaking of pre-planning, even pre-planning for that I'm going to create kind of like a worksheet, I guess, for my daughters that they can fill out for each of the places as just a way for them to think about where they've been and like write their favorite experience or the thing that they learned or maybe the thing that they were most uncomfortable about a certain destination or a person that they met that really whose story they loved, just to kind of get them thinking about how they're engaging in a little bit of storytelling as well, just because it's so important to me. But I was trying to think of ways to get them involved in that process as well, because I think, most of us are not so lucky to have this type of experience. And I think it'll be really valuable and to help them process it a little bit as well, which I'm sure you've seen from your journeys that writing is often a way that we can process all these things that we've experienced. So I think that is really valuable. Well, before we end, Shivya, I just have a few rapid fire questions. This is for our audience to be able to get to know a little bit more about you as a traveler and maybe inspire some of their journeys. The first question is, what are you reading right now?
I'm reading multiple books actually. So one is The Climate of Hope, and the other book is called Shul Khal. I spent the last month in Egypt, and this is a book that's written by an Egyptian woman. And it's the stories of five Bedouin women who kind of let her into their lives, and they're really, really intimate stories. So it's a fabulous book, and if you anyone who's listening to this, if you can find a copy, I highly, highly recommend it.
Excellent. Oh, that sounds really amazing. I had an opportunity many, many years ago to perhaps travel to stay with a Bedouin community in Egypt, and I wasn't able to make it work. And I'm very sad about it because I think it would have been um, a really powerful experience, but perhaps it will come my way again.
I
uh,
hope it does.
yeah, thank you. What is always in your suitcase or backpack when you travel?
I guess I always have a diary with me, just to write down random thoughts and things that don't make it anywhere else.
uh, to sojourn is to travel somewhere as if you live there. I know you're an expert in that. What is one place that you haven't been that you would love to sojourn?
I don't know if it's possible to be an expert in that, but I would love to spend more time in South America. And I've already been to Chile, but I would love to go back there and spend more time.
What do you eat that immediately connects you to a place that you've been?
That really depends on where I am. But as a vegan, I love to have a smoothie in the morning. So anything that's fresh and growing there is going to be in my system for sure.
Who was a person that inspired or encouraged you to set out and explore the world?
I think there've been many. Sorry, I know this is a rapid fire round, but I'm like going into sentences. But I think there've been so many people who've inspired this journey in different ways. Both people that I've met online and maybe never met in real life, but also people around the world, especially women. So whether they are fellow solo female travelers or they are women from the area and who are fighting, cultural traditions and social stereotypes in their own ways and really showing up every day in whatever they have to do. I think that really drives me and makes me aware of life.
Yeah, thank you. And no apologies. I usually call this my rapid fire ish because, as you also know, it's just going to become conversation. So it's okay. If you could take an adventure with one person, fictional or real, alive or past, who would it be?
That's a tough one. Um, I'm trying to remember the name. It's kind of eluding me right now. Um, okay, I will get back to you with the name.
It's okay.
But oh yeah, I think her name is Ursula something, and Ursula something was a Portuguese traveler who spent a long time back, I think in the 16th or the 17th century, back when women weren't allowed to travel out of their homes without a man. She kind of dressed up in a man's clothes with short hair and everything, and she traveled the world for a while, just because she wanted to. And it was here in Goa where I live right now that she was finally identified as a woman, and she was captured and put in jail. But luckily, one of the soldiers fell in love with her, and she was rescued by a man. But she did live the life that she wanted for a few years at least, and hopefully later as well. So she's someone I would love to travel with.
I think I love the early female explorers and adventurers and all the things that they had to go through to live that life and to travel. And I have often thought it would be fun to have travel experiences mapped after some of their experiences, to just try to imagine what that would have been like to travel so long ago as a woman. I mean, there's enough things that we run up against in this modern world to even imagine what it would have been like then. So thank you for sharing that. The last one, solo travel, is really for honoring women in the travel industry. Who is one woman you would admire and would love to recognize in this space?
I think there are many women, but really, I would love for more recognition to come towards women from rural communities who fight some insane prejudices and stereotypes to just be part of the tourism industry. So I'm thinking of all the maybe the handful of female guides that I've been lucky enough to hike with in remote parts of India, in South America and other parts of the world, but really just a handful that I can count on my fingertips. So it's really for, I think, recognition for all the women who are fighting really hard battles just to be part of this industry.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that into the conversation. That's always for me some people that I love to connect with as well. When you know that just for them to be in the position they're in, it's been quite a journey for them. And I really want to be able to honor and celebrate that as well. So thank you for bringing that into the space. And again, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to share this conversation, and I hope that people will find you in all the places that you are and follow you, and whatever resonates, that they'll be able to connect with you in the right way in the future.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm glad we finally had this conversation.